Hi, this is Dr. P here to talk about, in a sense, a form of realism in tactical and grand tactical games, and that is the relationship between maneuver and slaughter or combat. What's the ideal? I have a couple of quotes here. The first from Sir Winston Churchill. Battles are won by slaughter and maneuver. The greater the general, the more he contributes in maneuver, the less he demands in slaughter. Unquote. Sometimes there are even bloodless campaigns. For example, Julius Caesar in Spain in the Roman Civil War. He managed to put his enemy in situations where they knew he could have slaughtered them, but he didn't, and that happened more than once, and they finally surrendered and joined him. The other is from Sun Tzu, The Art of War. To fight and conquer in all your battles is not supreme excellence. Supreme excellence consists in breaking the enemy's resistance without fighting. Unquote. And that usually involves a lot of maneuver. So, realistically, maneuver must be at least as important, if not more important, than slaughter. And you can ask yourself, if you're making a battle game, generally tactical or grand tactical, is this possible in your game? Now, it depends on the game, it depends on the situation. But I'd say in most cases, it's almost certainly going to require fog of war, uncertainty about maneuver, if not also uncertainty about strength of units. If nothing hides maneuver, then it's just about impossible for it to be as important as it should be. Think of chess. Slaughter is more important in chess insofar as getting ahead by a piece, sometimes even just a pawn, is a huge advantage. If you add fog of war movement to chess, as in Kriegspiel chess, then maneuver becomes much more important. I'm not saying that maneuver isn't important in chess, because it is. But the materiel, which is a result of combat, is more important. So, one of the best arguments for including fog of war in a game is so that maneuver can be at least as important as combat, as important as it ought to realistically be. Now, clearly this is easier to do in video games, because by the nature of programming, the video game doesn't show a player anything unless the programmer decides to allow the player to see something. Block games in tabletop seem to be a straightforward way to do this. And that goes back all the way to l'attaque, which I'm probably not pronouncing right, which was the close ancestor of Stratego, which was patented in 1909 and may have been played before that for some time. I don't know. So, more than 100 years of block games. An alternative is simultaneous movement and adjudication, as in the game Diplomacy. Because there you have a fog of war in the uncertainty about how the opposition will move. Once they've moved, you know how they've moved, but by that time the combat has occurred and the results have occurred. This is practical in diplomacy, partly because there are no more than 34 units. It's a zero-sum game, and initially they're divided amongst 7 players, so early in the game a player averages about 5 units. Well, you can write down the orders for 5 units without too much trouble. It's a grand strategic game, and that's why you can get away with so few units. But if you're going to do a lot more units and have simultaneous movement and adjudication, then computer assistance is just about required these days. Now, I have an example, a space war game with various names that I don't need to bother with. It uses blocks to provide fog of war. Any single block can be a strength from 1 to 7. And that's not a hierarchy, it's a relative strength. So a 7 is 7 times stronger than a 1. A 4 is twice as strong as a 2. And any number of blocks can occupy a single location, which is, there's a hex board with systems on it, and the systems are connected by lines of movement. So sometimes you're in an empty hex, usually you're in a hex with a system in it. But only 4 pieces can move in a turn. The objective is to capture and hold a proportion of the valuable star systems, or capture and hold the opposing home system, and not allow the other player to recapture in the next turn. So this is a battle game, not a war game. There's no economy. There's not even a list of reinforcements. It's also symmetrical. But because of the fog of the war, that doesn't seem to matter so much. And the setup is a player setup, so the symmetry is immediately broken. It uses deterministic combat. Now, off the top of my head, I'd say that another way to de-emphasize combat, as compared with maneuver, is to take the chance out of it and use deterministic combat. But I'm sure there are lots of exceptions. I mean, chess has deterministic combat, doesn't it? So in this space war game, and I'll say I've already tried to adapt this system to the Spanish Civil War or other very fluid situations, there's lots of fighting, but the maneuver is just as important. In the course of the game, players will threaten several times to win the game, but usually are pulled back by the other player. Fairly often, the winner is the player with less combat strength remaining, and I think that's the best indication that maneuver trumps slaughter. As you might have gathered, I think this is one of my better games, still in prototype stage. Likely, you can think of other ways to emphasize maneuver and de-emphasize slaughter, if that's what you want to do. Thanks for listening.